Good evening. Welcome to the Pipeline. I'm Western Standard Alberta columnist Cory Morgan. This is our weekly panel show where we break down and dissect some of the most pressing issues of the week. This week, we got a treat. We're joined by Erika Barootes, Department Head of Applied Politics at Macamee College. How's it going, Erika?
Good. I'm glad to be back. It was a little bit of a hiatus, so.
Yeah. Well, I thought just once we'd spell out that whole title you've got. You're also right. Senator-elect, and podcaster. What else you got on your shingle these days?
Well, I still get introduced a lot of the time as the founding president of the UCP because there's so much Alberta talk about like the party and things like that. So it's a long list.
Right on. Okay. Well, I got one part listed today anyways. We'll try and add to all that resume on the future episodes.
It's better than Derek has ever done introducing my program.
It was a low bar. All right. And of course, we're also joined by opinion editor and birthday boy, Nigel Hannaford. How you doing?
You have to tell everybody it's my birthday.
Well, it's not every day you turn 50.
Yeah, really. and over and over and over again. Yeah, well, thanks very much, Cory. Great to be here. We've got a good lineup of subjects, and we'll have fun.
That we do. Lots to chew into today, as always. Nothing controversial, of course.
Well, Derek's not here, so where is Derek?
I don't know. Nobody told me either.
Yeah, he's farming.
Yeah,
I do believe he's farming.
Farming. Yeah. Okay. Is he growing weed now or something?
Also, it's not harvest.
Check with
so it's been raining.
Oh, I've noted. I mean, our newsroom is just jam-packed full of people, reporters, interns working, yet it was so quiet today.
Yeah, but you notice that they all sort of fanned out into the background, get out of the line of the camera.
Anyway, all right.
What have we got, Cory?
What do we got? Well, we're going to start, Erika, maybe you can introduce that. We're looking at a provincial mention and approach with the odious old supply management system. What's going on there?
Yeah. So if this is news to you, I'm going to break it down and possibly put in as many puns as humanly possible. So as you mentioned, like Alberta's premier has been churning up headlines by hinting at pulling, I know you'd like that, pulling the province out of Canada's longstanding dairy supply management system. This comes with the looming U.S. tariffs. They turned up the heat, and Alberta often feeling shortchanged on the dairy quotas that compared to Ontario and Quebec, and that's usually where we hear all of the supply management conversations coming from. And this idea is like having Alberta go out on its own and leaving the kitchen table to talk serious dinner debate. So while it's technically possible for Alberta to do this and set their own rules, and we've seen that in various different provinces on different files over the past century, it would face federal import controls and some frosty stares from other provinces. If Alberta pours its own glass of milk, brace the legal, economic, and political ripples that will spill far beyond our borders. I hope you guys like that one. I put some effort into it today.
I just think you milked. I thought you milked it to death, actually.
Yeah. Well, now that you've buttered up the issue, Nigel.
Oh my gosh, love it.
This is. This is one that kind of came out of the blue. I mean, I've been on about supply management for a long time, but to be honest, I never really thought of taking because it's more of a federal authority sort of thing. But having a province push back on it, that's a change of pace.
Well, I mean, I think as far as the Alberta pushback on it is concerned, obviously the situation being what it is between Alberta and Ottawa, anything that we've got, we're likely to bring forward. I mean, I first of all, let me say quite clearly and unequivocally, I am not a fan of supply management. There is no excuse for making people may pay more for dairy products. And if the government of Canada has to levy tariffs on American producers of 235%, which is a figure I found on the government's own website, 235% tariffs in order to keep Canadian product competitive with American imports, I got to tell you, we're paying too much for milk, butter, eggs, and dairy products generally. Now, having said that, there is a time and a place, and I believe the time was 50 years ago and the place was New Zealand, where it was very helpful to have some kind of a mechanism that would bring stability to a dairy industry that was falling apart. So with supply management, The idea was that you had a ticket, you could produce so much. They knew what they were going to get. They knew what they needed. They set the price, and then they maintained it, and the family farm was safe. However, what people have forgotten is that in Quebec, which is really where this is centered, and there's Ontario as well, and a bit in Alberta, but in Quebec, it's not the family farm anymore. We're talking about gigantic corporations who are running dairies and have basically an easy time of it. Now, the farmer, the dairyman, he's not the guy who has the easy time. He's the fellow who gets up at 5 o'clock to go and milk the cows and get the product on the way. They have stability, but it is a large industry that is being supported, and that's why it has become so very difficult to do anything about it, because these guys have got money, they've got political clout, they're very well organized, pick the best representatives in the public relations world, and here we are. We just had a month ago an act in Parliament saying that whatever else we're going to sacrifice when we talk trade with the Americans, supply management is safe. I don't think it should be. And I hope that the Premier acts on her talk.
Yeah, well, as far as effective lobbyists go, I mean, the Americans have the NRA. Canada has the dairy cartels. I mean, they are fantastic at lobbying, if nothing else. They're very effective, and they know how to twist the arms of every federal politician. Now, the tariffs are federal turf. There's not a heck of a lot the province could do about that. But the quota system and some of those other aspects, is there room, Erika, there where then the provincial government could intervene and open up the market, perhaps?
Yeah, and you know what? This is going to be me nerding out a little bit, because it is, as I mentioned, possible for the province to do this. I learned while looking at some new case studies, how provinces have made agreements with federal governments to change some of their policies. I learned that Manitoba had their own immigration and refugee settlement service agreement until 2012. And so it has been done. It could be done. The problem that Alberta is going to face on the political side is they have been driving this narrative for the last decade of get out of our lane. That happened under Premier Kenney and under Premier Smith. And this is something that is federal jurisdiction. And so the hypocritical side of Alberta standing up for farmers, which to Nigel's point, I agree that it got out of hand with supply management. It is dairy cartel as opposed to the local farmer. I think Alberta should actually start with looking at an agreement with the feds to give the feds the cop out of not having to piss off Ontario and mostly Quebec. And give Alberta maybe its own agreement. But I think them kind of going rogue is going to be very hypocritical of this government for them telling the feds to get out of their lane. So yes, it's possible. Yes, there is precedence for it on our national stage, but they've also got a balance. Like, this is the first time in years that we've seen all of the premiers and the prime minister actually collectively working. Is that Alberta throwing a wrench in this? And I know we have another topic we're going to talk about that could impact that on pipelines and indigenous negotiations. But like, is Alberta stirring the pot for the right reason right now? And is it also talking from two sides of their mouths? Is a political dance they're going to have to be very conscious of.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm more inclined, though that's my nature, of the Alberta to Ottawa elbows up approach, and to hell what they think, and let's do some unilateral things. I mean, some of the aspects, of all people, Andrew Coyne wrote a fantastic piece on it today. Well, he's written many fantastic pieces. It's just sometimes his attitude drives me nuts. But what he also pointed out, those quotas, I mean, they've created a commodity out of the quotas. For one cow, a quota now in Quebec is worth $25,000. In Western Canada, it's worth twice that. It's yet another area where there's a lot of inequity when it comes to the treatment across the country. Maybe shaking that tree can make them address that at least.
I think actually you need to put that on your Facebook page and then forward it to Andrew Coyne and, see if he thanks you or whether he kind of says, well, Cory Morgan,
he rarely addresses me. Once in a while on X, we have the odd exchange, but it rarely ends pleasantly.
No, to Erika's point there, I do. Sorry, Erika, go ahead.
No, you go. All
right,
you're talking about me anyway.
Address your point there that that you say it's possibly bad form, and you're right. But then we're dealing in a negotiation which is bad form from the very beginning. Mm-hmm. Like, the first bad form didn't come out of Alberta. It came out of the federal government with Bill C-69 and with the no tanker ban, with the ragging to death of the Energy East pipeline, cancellation of Northern Gateway, goes on and on. None of those things were legal. None of them were honest. None of them were well intentioned. There's no excuse. That was an attack on Alberta. So I think when you've been attacked, there's nothing wrong with you putting a few markers of your own out there and saying, yeah, sure, maybe this isn't the most reasonable thing in the world, but you drop your unreasonable one and I'll drop my unreasonable one. Basic union negotiations.
Well, I'm going to sound like my dad when I say two wrongs don't make a right. And I think that that's one of the political balances that this province is going to have to take on. Like I said, you could actually work out your own agreement with the federal government and have one-offs like the case study I mentioned about Manitoba. BC also did it with immigration refugee settlement, things like that, that I think that politically could give the CPC an out on having to have a say in it, the Liberal government a say in it. They might take some hits from the relationship between Quebec and Alberta. But to your point, I mean, it's a screwed up system. I don't love how it's played out. It's now dealing with cartels as opposed to the family farm, which I think is different in Alberta. And so it is kind of what Quebec is fighting for, is apples to Alberta's oranges. So I do think, though, that there's a diplomatic way to go about this without making this, a public relations strategy, which ultimately is, I think, going to hurt Smith down the road, because she's been criticized the federal government for not staying in their lane. I think you have to practice what you preach to, or at least to some extent.
So, Erika, I got to ask you this. I often get a phone call around about 4:00 saying, "Can you stop into the grocery store and pick up milk?
Mm-hmm.
Can you get?" So that's my excuse for knowing these prices. It's not because I'm a diligent researcher or anything like that, but butter seems to be around about $6.50 a pound. Sometimes you get it on special, $5.95. Costco a little less than that. That's Calgary prices. What are you paying up in Edmonton?
It's pretty similar. I do agree. Like, these are the surge of prices is not accessible now. I grew up buying everything from Hutterites. So, I, still try and do that local connection, and like, okay to pay more, but you're right. Like, going from supermarket, and those are where they have to, as a retailer, not decide on price because they need to make margins as well. So it's being set, you're right, at the federal level. And that is a challenge. It's hurting our industry. So again, I think that the affordability piece is a political position that the premier can take. Again, how she negotiates that with Ottawa, I caution on the one side. I'm not saying it's not the fight to pick. I'm not saying that that Alberta should have its own deal, just like we saw every province do with daycare, to fit what works best. This is a problem with the federal government, but I think that Alberta just has to be conscious of how they navigate this and take it more behind closed doors and work out their own deal. Because you're right, like, the prices are noticeable by families. I mean, if you have kids in your life that drink a copious amount of milk, and you're making big breakfasts on the weekends using the products that you're talking about, you do notice it. I mean, I can't remember the last time I didn't order one of those giant cartons from Costco or buy those for eggs, because it's the only thing that makes somewhat sense. So yeah, I think it's that not the what is the issue, but the how Alberta navigates it that I would caution as political concern.
Yeah. I remember that guy down in, was it Medicine Hat or Lethbridge with the chickens?
Yes, he got arrested for selling eggs because you're not allowed to have more than 300 chickens.
Yeah.
And they actually sent the RCMP. That'll segue well into something we're talking about later about the degree of where the government wants to crack down with justice and where they don't. But I mean, just in closing out, I mean, it's a frustrating system. I guess the discussion is what Smith, or if Smith should do anything. But just I'll leave off with that final thing to let people know about this system. We had 140,000 dairy farms when supply management came in. Now we have 9,000, and most of them are in Quebec and Ontario. So if the intent was to protect the family farm, it failed terribly.
Yeah.
All right, but
can I ask, because I know that Nigel said that he's researched this. Like, where is
No, I said I hadn't. My research was just being asked to pick up stuff at the grocery store.
Oh, right. Okay. So grassroots research. But like, have we seen where the CPC sits on this? Because I know they haven't, like, politically, they don't want to pick a fight with Quebec. But I mean, this is something that Maxime Bernier has been talking about for a long time. And is that, do we see this strategy being elevated at the conservative level federally to be able to correct this? Or do you think they're just going to stay out of the lane?
Oh, they're going to stay out of this for all their work. I had Polyev on the show, and I had to because it's been a burn my saddle for years and years.
Well, he's running in Alberta, though. His by-election's next month.
Yeah, and he clearly didn't even want to talk about it, but I'll give him credit for his honesty. He basically said to me that the system is bad, but it would cost us too much to get out of it. But that's a whole separate discussion on buying up quotas and things like that. But other than that, that was the shortest answer I got out of him in the whole interview. It's like, let's get on to something else. I don't want to touch supply management.
You might have to answer that in an upcoming debate.
Yeah, well, just a warning. I'll still keep picking at him on that one because it bugs me. All right. Well, let's get on to other things that are bugging folks. Nigel, we had a concert scheduled, a performance out in Halifax, and I guess getting to national jurisdiction again, federal property, and it's been canceled. What's going on?
Well, okay, so what happened? For those who haven't been keeping up with the news, there's an American Christian evangelist. He's very conservative in his views. Spoke well of Trump, which of course is anathema to the refined sensibilities in Canadian government circles. Perhaps for good reason at the moment, but by and large, he's doesn't go for critical theory. He's against the idea of the LGBT sexual minorities having special privileges, but he's a singer, and he wanted to come up to Canada, and he has come up to Canada, in fact, and has got a 2-week tour. He'll be in your town, Erika, in about a week's time. Anyway, name is Sean Feucht, F-E-U-C-H-T, Sean Feucht. And his opening was going to be at a Parks Canada site in Halifax. And what happened was that people objected, saying not to the fact that he was a Christian evangelist, per se, but that his views did not reflect the core values of Parks Canada of inclusion and a safe place and so forth. Now, for me, the issue is this. Parks Canada is public property. Some people obviously don't agree with what Mr. Feucht is all about. On the other hand, I have a suspicion that a lot of people do. And so is Parks Canada only for the people who see things the government's way, or is it for whoever comes along who's got the money and in good faith puts it down and then they go and do their event? Now, for those following the case, I believe that Mr. Feucht has found an alternative location, but you can now see the stories starting to pop up where the city of Charlottetown, where he is to do it as if it's any of their business, say, well, we're not supportive of this. And that's typical of the kind of response because he's an American conservative, So we have a thing with the Americans at the moment, but actually it's at the government level. At our level, if you're a Christian and you like that kind of music, then you should be able to go to it. And it's kind of irritating that the government is taking this sides in this way.
Well, yeah, and I mean, it's a public space, kind of my view, but I understand you don't want to host a Klan march, or I suspect if it was an anti-Israel march, they probably wouldn't say a thing. As usual.
Well, they had an LGBT event there at this very site last week, apparently. So clearly they favor certain points of view and not others.
It's difficult. I mean, you either have all or nothing. I mean, you can't pretend it's not politicized. I'm sure if you had good old Jan Arden up there pissing and moaning, she'd be up and making her political views on the stage, and nobody would say a peep. It's, do we have public venues or not? I mean, I'm not a big fan of, Christian rock, those sorts of things. So, you know what? I would just choose not to go. I don't find it that complicated, but our cancelers seem to always find a way through it. Like Erika, what do you think the obligations should be then on public? I mean, I understand they do have to have a degree of vetting of who they have in those spaces, but it does seem to be kind of a unfair tilt.
Oh, 100%. Like, who in Parks Canada has nothing to do that they're surveying where a religious group is playing concerts? Like, obviously, you could be doing more things like reviewing forestry and wildfire management instead of looking at who's performing where. So, yeah, I think you guys are saying the exact same thing I am, that, okay, like, either make it for everyone or not. Listen, I just Googled it when you guys were saying, like, Jan Arden is actually performing at the Badlands Amphitheater in Drumheller, which is part of the Alberta Badlands. So if that's okay, why, which I believe is provincial, but either way, like, the province of Alberta is not saying, oh, we don't like your values and beliefs. Also, who the hell knows what the values and beliefs and brand of the national parks is, and how does it not relate to a organization that is very community and collaborative focused to bring entertainment? Like, to me, I'm like, where do they not align? And so I think it's just a bunch of BS. I think it's picking a fight that doesn't need to be picked. I think it is totally, to your point, politicizing something that is actually just like, you don't have to be Christian to like Christian rock. You could just like, you don't have to be from the country to like country music. I think it's absolutely an infringement on freedom of expression, freedom of choice, freedom of all of those things, which I think would probably be on brand for a national park. I think this is like a bureaucrat or a department that doesn't know their damn job. And so it's really unfortunate. I'm glad that they were able to find a new venue. And I hope when they come to Alberta, they are very welcome here.
We'll buy a ticket for you, Erika, so you can go and see them and put it on expenses.
I like that you don't think I need friends. Like, you can maybe throw me too.
I'm not making any judgments on you, but I tell you what, I want to go back to what you said early on, right at the start of that rant. You said, well, has Parks Canada got nothing better to do? Are these people, where do they get their ideas from? Well, in a thoughtful opinion piece written by, well, I admit it, I wrote it myself. I stayed up late last night to do it. I looked at what the federal government has been doing under the Trudeau administration and subsequently continuing under Mr. Carney, and how they are actually using government ministries to try and change the way that Canadians think. I mean, the high school civics course says, well, everybody thinks what they think and they choose the politicians they like best, and then the politicians go and govern. That's sort of the grade 11 idea of what politics is about. And I think, broadly speaking, that described things until Trudeau Jr. came on the scene in 2015. But since that time, there has been a very deliberate attempt, an intentional, they even talk about it, to actually make Canadians into a better, kinder, gentler, woker, more accepting, more all the words that they use, people. And that's not what they were elected to do, but they quietly do it. And the way they do it, there's a lot of ways. Parks Canada, for example, has been given a mandate to tell Canadian history in a certain way, not the way you were taught. So that's why you see the placards around the statues changing, if in fact the statues even stay. The CRTC has been empowered to take over the internet in Canada. There were 3 landmark bills in the last couple of years to facilitate that. One of them, the Online Harms Act, didn't get passed. That died on the order paper, but that was actually the one that would have said, look, folks, if you see something you don't like, complain. We'll pay the costs. You sue the person. If you win, you get money. And we'll vanquish people with bad ideas. What else was there? CRTC, the Privy Council office. Now, there's a number of these things. But here's the one that really grabbed me. Just last week, it emerged, thanks to Blacklocks, that the Privy Council office has a section that is specifically tasked to change the way people think, to change opinions. That's the top of the food chain in the federal government. The Privy Council office is geographically, it's you exit the Langevin block back door and you walk into the PCO. They're like that. And so this government is actually doing something he wasn't elected to do, which is to try and change Canadians. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of this thing in Nova Scotia.
And this came out today. I didn't know that, folks. I'm not queuing up Nigel's, right, but this was published today, and it does cover all of those, Nigel?
It was published last night.
Oh, perfect.
You will receive your own personal copy by email after the show.
Perfect. So, I do get the newsletters though. But I would love it right after the show.
I'll just remind people, it's the time to, if you want to catch those columns, those news, everything else, you got to make the plug for this show. Get on there, westernstandard.news. We're subscriber based. We aren't taking tax dollars. So if you want to get past that pesky paywall and see those columns and news and rants and raves, get on there, take out a subscription. It's $10 a month, $100 a year. Yep, not bad.
That $100 a year is great. I encourage everyone to do that.
Oh yeah, we never used to think twice about a newspaper subscription getting it dropped on your doorstep. No, you don't even have to get rid of that old newspaper.
Man, you can't even get a movie ticket for $10.
No, it's a heck of a deal. And
well, I can.
Okay, I guess. Oh yes, you hit that birthday just past 65.
50. I thought he was 50.
Well, or something,
something like that. Yeah, the makeup artist is pretty competent.
It's in the double digits there. All right. Well, we'll see what happens with it. But I mean, it's just that role of federal places. I grew up in Banff. I know very well about Parks Canada. And this, as I was saying in the office, it started a long time ago with Sheila Copps when she was the heritage minister, meddling in things.
Oh, what did she do?
She shut down a cadet camp that had been operating north of Banff for like 40 years. Every year they would come out, they'd do rock climbing and things like that because it's a good environment for it. And of course, being typical Tequila Sheila, it was mostly beaking on about how the militarization and such shouldn't be encouraged and other things. So it wasn't just a matter of an inappropriate venue. She just felt that the political messaging was incorrect. Thus, she shut it down. So,
it tells you something about the general caliber of liberal representation is that after she retired from politics, even conservatives who were trying to react with the federal government might seek her out. And you get little anecdotes saying, well, actually, she was one of the better ones. But everything you said is true. And the one that I hold her against her with my wife and I really liked the gardens out at Lake Louise by the hotel there. Absolutely beautiful. People would book them to have their wedding photographs taken. And it was just a nice lawn, beautiful flowers. Everything was well kept up. Mrs. Copps decided that was much too sophisticated and ordered it be returned to the natural state with native plants, such as the Icelandic poppy. And now what you see when you go out there is the weed bed infested by gophers and ravens pecking at them. It's really sad how that was destroyed. That's on Mrs. Copps' account.
They've micromanaged the parks in some terrible ways with personal agendas, and it hasn't stopped, unfortunately. Well, let's get on with personal agendas, vendettas. The longest mischief trial in Canadian history has reached its final phase now with sentencing. I think nobody was shocked that they found Tamara Lich and Chris Barber guilty, but now we're at what would be the conclusion of this, I guess, with a sentence.
Well, this is sort of a type with what we were speaking about just a moment ago about how the government is trying to manage people rather than govern. Yeah, the sentencing hearing for Tamara Lich and Chris Barber got started earlier today, and I'm going to say that how their case turns out is going to be one of those situations where in the rearview mirror, everything you need to know about who runs Canada and how it is run will be there to see. So, look, quick rundown. Let's just look back. A few months ago, Lich and Barber were found guilty of mischief on charges arising from their activities at the time of the Convoy in 2022. And the Crown is seeking a prison sentence of 7 years for Lich and 8 years for Barber. Now, this is for mischief. Mischief is kicking over outhouses and causing a ruckus in the back alley at midnight. But they charged them for mischief, and I guess the law permits sentences of this size. And Barber was also convicted of counseling others to disobey a court order, which is why they're looking for a higher sentence from him. Now, this, of course, is a little outrageous when you actually know and feel the issue. When people don't get 7 years for killing each other. We had a story just in the last week about somebody who attacked his girlfriend, stabbed her 3 times, hit her over the head with a lead pipe, and 3 years, I mean, if the government likes your point of view, you can cause all the mischief you like and you won't get charged. So really what happened here was that the Convoy and all of those activities exposed the intellectual nudity of the Trudeau regime. And governments hate to be exposed like that. So they cracked down hard, and you'll remember how the bank accounts were attached and how they were listening in on the cell phones, and there was some fairly vigorous suppression of public gatherings there, people getting charged with horses and so forth and so on. But the provincial premiers were this was all about control. The provincial premiers were told that they wouldn't get federal money unless they cooperated with what was often a nonsensical plan. I mean, we're seeing now that vaccines were not universally safe and not universally effective, but we were told at the time, got to do this. And this, of course, was where this started. It came when truckers, very solitary occupation, being a trucker. You're in the cab, you don't have too much company. And they were advised, cross-border truckers, very late in the pandemic, that suddenly they had to be vaccinated. Well, they knew that there was no difference between a virus on the American side of the border and on the virus on the Canadian side. And they knew what we all suspected, that the vaccine didn't do anything for you. So, in short, the truckers knew that the Trudeau government's vaccine mandate for them had nothing to do with science and everything to do with politics. And so they said enough. And we all know what happened. And there won't be any apologies coming from the government either. So, look, these two people are in a very awkward spot. My guess is, if you want to guess, is that they're already found guilty. They'll be given a stiff sentence, and then as a generous act of condescension, that will be suspended or not. That they won't actually go to jail. But the message is out there: don't mess with us. We're in charge.
Yeah, I hope you're correct in that sense, and I suspect the sentence will be similar in that. I mean, they've been found guilty. That portion's done. The hearings were held. Maybe there'll be an appeal. Who knows? But now it's what will be the appropriate punishment. Both of them did, again, an excessive amount of time pre-court, without bail for a mischief charge, and that tends to be considered triple time served. I think a judge could come in and say, don't do it again. There's your time. This is your suspended sentence. But it's what the Crown is asking for is still outrageous. Just as I was driving in this morning, I was listening about a horrific case just today in Calgary. The Crown has submitted on a case where two parents tortured their 18-month-old to death, and they've been convicted. The Crown is asking for 8 years. So the Crown considers that sort of crime to be on par with what Lich and Barber did. I mean, I understand the Crown can ask for whatever they like. It's up to the judge in the end. But that says a lot about how they're viewing this particular offense versus, some of the stuff I think that is almost universally people could say is horrible and deserves the full extent of the law. The other part is this, they want to make an example, but would a harsher sentence be preventative? Does it look like Barber or Lich are going to start another convoy? Does it look like they're at risk of putting the public at risk any longer? I haven't seen any indication of that. Erika, I would think the judge would take those things into account. Again, I mean, he's found them guilty, but I don't think he'll be inspired to give them an excessive incarceration or anything.
Well, I would hope not. I think the challenge we're facing right now is that this is political, and this is, I haven't been tracking, unfortunately, but the appointment of the judges is, federal. And so we've seen a big surgence of the judicial being influenced by appointments by the federal government over the last decade, even the Supreme Court, because Harper hadn't filled many of those vacancies. And so we're in a situation where the judicial system, I think, is trying to set an example by these individuals. But I mean, if you're comparing and contrasting their crime, which they've already been found guilty of, especially on the mischief file, it's like, well, what happened to all those people that ruined statues and violated public property and decided to light churches on fire, like things like that? What is their punishment? And if it's not equal to what we're seeing from Barber and Lich, like, why is that the case, and how are the values and beliefs being penetrated to our judicial system? So that's my first concern. The second part is kind of coming back to what I was talking about with Parks Canada. It's like, does the judicial system not realize the huge impact we have on human trafficking right now, or domestic abuse? I mean, every day, even on LinkedIn, I'm seeing stories of women across Canada being killed because of the fact that we don't have harsh punishment for those dealing with domestic violence, and we don't have the right services to protect those women and children and men in some cases, or even elder abuse, right? Like, I think that this is one where it's just so political that my jaw will not drop if this sentence is higher than we think it should be. But that is completely inappropriate and completely unfounded, that it's comparing these to cases that are far, like the one you use, that are far more consequential to society. Like, I don't think they're going to get out and be the first thing they're going to do is go start another protest or convoy. Like, I think they've learned their lesson. They've served copious amounts of time, and hopefully that gets taken into consideration. But I wouldn't be surprised if this was to politicize and make an example out of these individuals. So we'll see what happens. I unfortunately don't have confidence in the judicial process, given the penetration by the government and political values being jammed down their throats. So hopefully this judge has a better conscience than the Liberal government.
You've brought that to the right point in the discussion, Erika. You're talking about the politicization of the judiciary. I had the papers put in my hands a few years ago about people who wanted to be judges. I always thought that, to be a judge, somebody tapped you on the shoulder and said, you fit. But no, you just put an application in if you're qualified at all. And so what's on the qualification form is very interesting. It's a very woke agenda that they are. So they're looking for a certain type of person who thinks a certain type of way, and neither Cory nor I would qualify, and it wouldn't purely be on our lack of legal
I might
training.
From the gender I check, but then you do a background check on me, and I don't fit a lot of their inclusive narrative.
Erika, that's your next stop on your resume. Point being, but that's
it's probably similar to the Senate application.
You just need a different prime minister, I think. But anyway, so the system is stacked, but it harks back to what we were talking about a little earlier, about the way that the government is trying to influence Canadians, who they are, what they think, what they can do. And the Convoy was a challenge to that whole way of thinking. So they are absolutely going to focus their hatred. Well, let's not beat around the bush. They don't like Lich and Barber. They're going to focus that on those two individuals as a warning to everybody else. And you know what the proof of this is going to be? One of our columnists pointed this out yesterday. He said, in the West, Lich and Barber will be heroes. In the East, they will be widely and universally disparaged.
Well, and I mean,
and that our democracy might not be a democracy, but a dictatorship. Maybe that might be an undertone.
Well, and just to look from, to close it off, like from political motive, if that's indeed the thing, I would think politically the Liberals, especially with a new prime minister, just want to put this one to bed. It's been years. Give them a suspended sentence, get it off the docket, and stop people from hearing about it. But if they give them time in federal prison, they're going to reignite this.
Yes.
And they're going to martyr them. And it's not going to have the effect of calming the protests. It might spawn a whole new one. And I just think if the judge is looking from that perspective too, everybody's just kind of better off by getting this thing finished and into the history books rather than a current problem. But we'll see. Nothing surprises in this country anymore. I wouldn't bet money on any of the outcomes.
No, I think that is a really good point, Cory, though, on the Balance Act that Carney's administration now has to look at, because he doesn't wear any of those things. The Emergency Act and the usage upon that has been criticized. And so, I would almost think it would be in the prime minister's best interest, not obviously calling the judge, but in the fact that this sets a tone that he's going to have to carry this forward. And like you said, it might spark up additional protests, which would be, I think he'd handle maybe very differently than Trudeau. And so, yeah, it's probably a dumpster fire he doesn't want to deal with. So the best tactic for everyone would just to be, recognize what happened. They are already guilty, give them a minimal sentence and move on, because we can't afford in this time of desire for unity to have more divisive things, especially between the West and the East.
Erika, it's interesting the way you put that there will never be a phone call between a politician and a judge on this matter. Mm-hmm. Not because that would be illegal, but because there is no necessity. Everybody around government understands what is necessary. If they didn't understand, they wouldn't have been hired. So it's any so-called arm's length agency that you care to think of, that's the way it goes. So between that and a thoughtful editorial in the Globe and Mail or something, they get the word around to each other what's needed.
So we had a few big issues to hit today, so we're really running the clock. So we'll have to hit her quick here with this. The First Nations, unsurprisingly, in BC, are opposed to a pipeline coming through. Is there anything they ever support?
Well, more land ceded to them for their exclusive administration. But the story we're talking about here, Erika, is one that came out yesterday, where the coastal First Nations in British Columbia have sent a strongly worded open letter to Mark Carney, Prime Minister, asking him to reject the new pipeline proposal that is being advanced by Premier Smith. It's the northern route. And it's the one that David Eby said, well, she doesn't have a sponsor and she doesn't have there's no project. So, well, the Indians think that there's a project, and they've asked Mr. Carney to deep six it. Now, I would personally, because I'm old and cynical, interpret that as just a sort of first move in the negotiations to see where this thing is going to land and who gets paid what for doing it. But that's the story. So, Erika, you know about pipelines.
I know how much the federal government and the indigenous groups can get in the way of one. I think that, there was a lot of people that have looked to Carney and his Building Canada Act as a symbol of unity and looking at actually making Canada an economic and energy superpower. The key, and I think you've talked about this on the show, I know I've talked about with you folks before, the biggest thing is the stakeholder of the indigenous pathways. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but there is already corridors set up for a pipeline like this, and it wouldn't actually be completely unfeasible to run another pipeline along the transportation corridor and other pipelines that exist for an LNG pipeline. So to me, it's kind of a weak argument by this indigenous group on the why, because it's already a pathway there. And so, but this is going to be a big symbol of Carney's leadership. And if he's serious about this, because it's always been identified that the hardest stakeholder and hardest hurdle on this Building Canada's Act is the indigenous groups and those types of consultations. So I don't know if they're asking for a full stop, if they're asking for more funds, guaranteed income or employment. Like, these are the types of negotiations I think would come from indigenous partners that actually want to inject revenue and sustainability into their communities, especially in this case. So again, we'll see how Carney navigates this, but this is going to be a hurdle that we see on every one of those pipeline projects that are coming down the road.
Well, until a federal leader has the courage to define the difference between consent and consulting, we're not going to get anything done. So, I mean, that's just the reality. Yeah. Somebody's got to put a foot down eventually, because they're, implying that we need consent, and technically we don't. The Supreme Court's ruled on that many times, actually.
Yeah.
But
I'm okay. So I was going to say, I don't know, the appetite in BC. I suspect there's a more appetite in Alberta to push back on this consent versus consultation. Do you think that this is like the DOA of these projects, Cory or Nigel?
If somebody doesn't make a stand on that portion, and they got the Supreme Court behind them. I wrote a recent column on that, breaking it down. There's been multiple rulings, but no politician dares to say it. If they won't, nothing will get done.
Well,
Because you'll never get full consent.
To Erika's point, I think you put it very well this morning. And you say, well, 3% of the population get to determine what the other 97% get to do. That can't go on.
It's sensitive, I know, and I wouldn't want to be the politician to have to step into that mire, but eventually somebody's going to have to. All right, well, we're on to the parting shots. Yes.
Oh, gosh, were you as disappointed as I was with the First Minister's meeting in Muskoka there? You know, the big report this morning was Doug Ford coming out and saying what a nice, humble man Mr. Carney was, you know, and all sorts of that sort of stuff. And what I was actually hoping for from it was some idea of what our leaders are going to do about electric vehicles, about crime, immigration, overtaxation, getting some infrastructure built. We've just been talking about that, you know, the whole list. It's getting right with the U.S. Cozying up to Europe isn't going to help, but none of this was talked about. These gatherings could be useful, but for Canadians, the day after is no better than the day before. They meet, they eat, nothing changes.
They eat well, typically, but...
Muskoka's lovely. Yes. They really look after you.
All right, what have we got for us, Erika?
Yeah, mine is a little bit more close to home. It's at the Alberta NDP and this Make Believe Better Together campaign that they're running. And the reason, regardless of how you feel about the Alberta Next panel, and the jury's still out for me on what it's going to provide as a pathway for Albertans, but it doesn't matter to me. If you're going to be hypocritical about the government using tax dollars to do this type of panel, then don't be the pot calling the kettle black and create your exact same Better Together campaign to contrast it and using tax dollars. This is exactly what the Alberta NDP did with the Canadian pension plan conversation. And so it's like, if you don't like it, take a different strategy as opposed to doing the exact same thing that you're criticizing. I just think it's another example of this NDP government, especially under Nenshi, really not even understanding how anything works in government or how to get the attention of Albertans. It's a pot calling kettle black mentality. And I just think hopefully Albertans see through all of it.
Right on. And I'll just be quick with mine, just with those knobs running that long ballot protest. It's just an abuse of the system. I'm already sick of them. It's 100 and some people on the ballot now. It's huge. I figure maybe one of the things is if you want to start a long ballot process, you should be willing to have that long ballot rolled up and stuffed somewhere most uncomfortable, and maybe that would inspire them not to do it. But we need to amend the Elections Act, obviously, to make some different signature requirements or official agent things.
Do you want to draft the language on that?
Well, I'd be willing to. I might stay out of the rectal abuse, but all the same, it's just something, you know, again, our tolerance gets too far, and then we allow people to just pointlessly abuse things. If there was a purpose to their protest, maybe I could see it, but they're just doing it for the sake of doing it, and it's tiresome.
Well, and it pisses off voters, and that's like the exact anti-democratic point that I think that they pretend to be making. So
exactly.
Federal government, stop doing things that don't matter to people. Get the hell out of parks, concerts, and focus on domestic abuse, human trafficking, and dealing with the indigenous consultations. Like, this is another one that, what a waste of tax dollars.
Absolutely.
Amen. Preach it, sister.
All right. Well, Erika, Nigel, thank you very much. It was a great chat. It went by too quickly this time.
Yeah, it was great, though.
Work hard, so I appreciate it. Look forward to the next time we're together in this kind of lineup, perhaps, and we'll catch up next one.
Could be as soon as next week.
Right on.
And hopefully Derek's scarming
Great
still.
to see you, Erika.
We'll see.
See ya.
All right. So thank you all for tuning in. Guys, make sure to tune into the other shows. Nigel has a fantastic interview with Premier Smith that's up there. I've got my show Wednesdays at noon. And subscribe to the Western Standard. And hey, check out Macamee College, you know, an applied politics course. Well worth it if you really want to get into depth of things. So thank you very much for joining us this week, and we'll see you next time.